Hello, Internet. So, this week, cracking open booster box of the newest Yu-Gi-Oh set, Ancient Guardians. And before that, look, new playmat. I'll have, note to myself, put up a picture of the actual full art of the playmat. It's Kirby one inspired by, or based off of the famous painting The Big Wave. I got this particular one off of Amy Amy. You can probably also get it from Hobby Link Japan. PlayAsia might carry them. Basically, any place that imports from Japan, you could probably pick these playmats up from. But anyways, so I'll quickly get this opened up and we'll get right into it. Okay, so let's get right into it. Only things I know about this set is it's 60 card set and it introduces 3 new archetypes, and I didn't see any mention of support for older archetypes, so that's a little bit interesting. Usually most sets, they'll say, oh, includes support for this archetype, and then you actually look at the set and there's one whole card for that archetype. But I mean, I imagine there's probably going to be the usual generic support. But we have Urzartic Megabilis. During the main phase, quick effect, you contribute one other level 7 or higher monster from your hand. Special summon this card from your hand. No, that's not a bad effect. Also, you cannot special summon for the rest of this turn except monsters with a level. I'm guessing that's to, you wouldn't be able to, oh no, I guess you wouldn't be able to XE summon, would you? Because that's rank, not level. And you also wouldn't be able to link summon. If this card is special summoned while you control another Urzartic monster, you can target one card in your opponent's graveyard, banish it. You may only use each effect once per turn. That's definitely not a bad start for the set. Here's Rock Sunrise. Target one beast monster in your graveyard, special summon that target, and if you do, all face-up monsters your opponent currently controls lose 200 attack for each beast, plant, and winged beast monster currently in your graveyard until the end of this turn. You can only activate one Air's Rock Sunrise per turn. This I'm pretty sure is a reprint from previous set. Damage equal Reptile. Once per turn, when you take damage from a battle involving a reptile monster, you can special summon one reptile monster from your deck with attack less than or equal to the damage you took. I won't lie, that's an interesting one. Be interesting to see what people do with it. Luster Pendulum, the Draco Slayer. Once per turn, if you have a card in your hand, if you have a card in your other Pendulum zone, you can destroy that card, and if you do, add one card from your deck to your hand with the same name as that card. And cannot special summon, fusion, synchro, or Xyz monsters using this card as material except Draco Slayer monsters. Okay. Ogdoatic Origin. It's apparently actually based off of Egyptian mythology. The Ogdoadics stuff. If a face-up reptile monster you control is destroyed by battle or an opponent's card effect, you can target one card in your opponent's controls, send it to the graveyard. If this card in the field zone is destroyed by your opponent's card effect, you can send cards from the top of your opponent's deck to the graveyard equal to the number of reptile monsters with different names in your graveyard. You can only use each effect once per turn. Huh. So it's sort of turning reptiles into a mill deck. That's interesting. Urzartic Megapolar. During the main phase, you contribute one other level 7 or higher monster from your hand, special summon. Okay, so this is seems like that's going to be the running theme for all of the Urzartic monsters. You cannot special summon for the rest of this turn except monsters with level. If this card is special summoned while you control another Urzartic monster, you can target one spell or trap your opponent controls, destroy it. You can only use each effect once per turn. And Dulsolfa Cord Cutia. Pendulum summons of your Soulful Cord pendulum monsters cannot be negated. And while you have an even pendulum scale in your pendulum zone, Soulful Cord pendulum monsters you control gain attack equal to 100 times their own pendulum scale. If this card is normal or special summoned, you can add one Soulful pendulum monster from your deck to your hand except Dolsolf La Ford Cutie. You can only use this effect once per turn. I know, like, it's Do, Re, Mi, So, Fa, La, Ti, Do. It's just so weird because I think, very odd name change because I remember looking up just to see what it was, and the Japanese archetype uses a different name where it's still, I think it's Do, Re, Mi chord instead of the Sol, Fa chord. It's just such an odd change. Oh, we got a reprint of Venominagia, the deity of poisonous snakes. Yes, I know I probably horribly mispronounced that. Cannot be normal summoned or set, must be special summoned with Rise of the Snake deity or by its own effect. Gains 500 attack for each reptile monster in your graveyard. Neither player can target this card with card effects. It's unaffected by other cards and their effects. When this card is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, you can banish one other reptile monster from your graveyard, special summon this card. When this card inflicts battle damage to your opponent, place one Hyper Venom counter on it. When the third Hyper Venom counter is placed on this card, you win the duel. I mean, it's very straightforward. It's actually, I mean, if you can get it out on the field, it's a very good card. The catch is getting it out on the field. Ogdoadic Calling. Special summon 2 Ogdoadic tokens, Reptile Dark level 2, attack defense 0. Or if you have 8 or more Ogdoadic monsters with different names in your graveyard, you can apply this effect instead. Special summon 2 reptile monsters with different names from your graveyard. You can only activate 1 Ogdoadic Calling per turn. I mean, very good support for Ogdoadics. We have the Skullmeister. When a card effect is activated in your opponent's graveyard, quick effect, you can send this card from your hand to the graveyard, negate that effect. It's a very good hand trap for dealing with graveyard effects. Be curious to see how much play this guy sees. Phenomenon, the king of poisonous snakes, cannot be special summoned by another monster's effect. Unaffected by Venom Swamp, gains 500 attack for each reptile monster in your graveyard. When this card is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, you can banish one other reptile from your graveyard, special summon this card. I mean, it's not bad. Basically, it's a smaller version of Venominaga, except doesn't win if he hits your opponent 3 times. Another Ayers Rock Sunrise. King of the Feral Imps. Once per turn, you can detach 1 material from this card, add 1 reptile monster from your deck to your hand. That's actually a really good effect. La Soulfall Chord Angelia. Your opponent cannot activate spell or trap or monster effects while your Soulful Chord Pendulum monsters is pendulum summoned. And, oh dear, that's tiny text. While you have an odd pendulum scale in your pendulum zone, if your Soulful Chord Pendulum monster attacks, your opponent cannot activate spell or traps or effects until the end of the damage step. During your main phase, you contribute 1 Soulful Chord Pendulum monster, even if face down, and if you do, special summon 1 Soulful Chord Pendulum monster from your deck whose pendulum scale is 2 higher or 2 lower than the monster, except last Soulful Chord Angelia. You can only use this effect once per turn. A little surprised because it's letting you tribute card face down. Normally they don't do that. So that's be interesting to see how often that effect gets used. We have Offering to the Snake Deity. Target 1 face-up reptile monster you control and 2 cards your opponent controls. Destroy all 3 targets. I mean, it's not bad per se because you're effectively being net 0 for cards. So, and I mean, reptile. Yeah, the reptiles obviously want to have cards in the graveyard, so it's not really like you're at a loss per se. We have Rose Soulful Chord Dreamia. Pendulum summons of your Soulful Chord Pendulum monsters cannot be negated. And while you have an odd pendulum scale in your pendulum zone, if a Soulful Cord pendulum monster card you control would be destroyed by your opponent's card effect, you can destroy this card instead of one of those cards. If you control a Soulful Cord card in your pendulum zone, you can special summon this card from your hand. You can only use this effect once per turn. Oh, that's actually quite a nice effect. We have Trade-in, discard one level 8 monster, draw 2 cards. Not sure how you feel about that one. Not sure, I should have checked the levels of the erratic monsters. Urzartic Quint Charge. Once per turn, you can pay 700 life points and activate one of the following effects. Add one Urzartic monster from your graveyard to your hand, or tribute 2 Urzartic monsters even if face down, and if you do, special summon from your extra deck one Urzartic monster with a level equal to the difference in levels of those monsters, ignoring its summoning conditions. When your Urzartic Synchro monster is destroyed by an opponent's attack, you can activate this effect. Your opponent must shuffle cards into the deck so the number of cards in their hand, field, and graveyard is 7. Ooh, that's actually pretty nasty. That being said, tribute 2 Urzartic monsters, and if you do special summon from your extra deck one Urzartic monster with a level equal to the difference in levels of those monsters. That's very specific. We have Viper's Rebirth. If all monsters in your graveyard are reptiles, target one non-tuner in your graveyard, special summon it, but destroy it during the end phase of this turn. Yeah, decent enough. Snake Rain. Discard 1 card, send 4 reptile monsters from your deck to the graveyard. So, quite a good card. And Fossil Cord Fancia. Pendulum summons of your pendulum summons of your Soulful Cord monsters cannot be negated. While you have an odd pendulum scale in your pendulum zone, if your Soulful Cord pendulum monsters will be destroyed by battle, you can destroy this card instead. During your main phase, you can add 1 Soulful Cord pendulum monster from your deck to your extra deck face up except Fossil Cord Fancia. You can only use this effect once per turn. I'm noticing a trend where a lot of them seem to have the if one of the monsters would be destroyed, you can destroy this card instead. Soulful Cord Musica. Activate one of these effects based on the pendulum scales of Soulful Cord pendulum monsters you control. Odd, special summon 1 Soulful Cord pendulum monster with an odd pendulum scale from your extra deck. Even, special summon 1 Soulful Cord pendulum monster with an even pendulum scale from your extra deck. Even and odd, target 1 card your opponent controls, destroy it. You can only activate 1 Soulful Cord Musica per turn. So that's decent enough. You're either gaining special summoning monsters for free or destroying opponent's cards, so it's not bad. We have Trade-in. Mi Soulful Cord Elatia. Pendulum summons of your Soulful Cord pendulum monsters cannot be negated. When you have an even pendulum scale in your pendulum zone, you take no damage from battle involving your Soulful Cord pendulum monsters. If this card is normal or special summoned, you can target 1 spell or trap your opponent controls, return it to the hand. You can only use this effect once per turn. I have another Snake Rain. Light Serpent. If this card is sent from the hand to the graveyard, you can special summon this card from your graveyard. Cannot be used as synchro material. That's quite nice. I have Flogos the Ogdoadic Boundless. If this card is sent from the field to the graveyard or special summoned from the graveyard, you can target 1 face-up monster your opponent controls and 1 monster in the graveyard with an equal or higher attack than that target. Special summon that monster from the graveyard to their field, and if you do, send the other monster they control to the graveyard. If this card is in your graveyard, you can send 1 card from your hand to the graveyard, add this card to your hand. You can only use each effect once per turn. And Soulful Cord Elegance. Activate one of these effects. Place 1 Soulful Cord pendulum monster from your deck into your pendulum zone. Add 1 Soulful Cord pendulum monster from your hand to your extra deck face up. Then place 2 Soulful Cord pendulum monsters, 1 odd and 1 even pendulum scale, from your deck to your pendulum zones. Add 2 cards, 1 odd and 1 even pendulum scale from your pendulum zones to the extra deck face up, and if you do, draw 2 cards. So it seems to be quite good at getting the chords set up at any rate. We have Ignister Prominence, the Blasting Draco Slayer. Once per turn, you can target 1 pendulum monster on the field or 1 card in the pendulum zone, destroy it, and if you do, shuffle 1 card on the field into the deck. Once per turn, you can special summon 1 Draco Slayer monster from your deck in defense position, but it cannot be used as material for a synchro summon. Huh. This seems quite nice. Sulpha Cord Formal. While you have a Sulpha Cord card in your pendulum zone, when your opponent activates a spell or trap or monster effect, shuffle 1 face-up pendulum monster from your extra deck into the deck, then apply these effects. Pendulum monsters you control are unaffected by that effect. Cards in your pendulum zone cannot be destroyed by that effect, or cards in your pendulum zone cannot be banished by that effect. It's different. Another Ogdoadic Calling. Wavering Eyes. Destroy as many cards in each player's pendulum zones as possible, then apply these effects in sequence, depending on the number of cards destroyed by this effect. 1+, inflict 500 damage to your opponent. 2+, you can add 1 pendulum monster from your main deck to your hand. 3+, you can banish 1 card on the field. And 4, you can add 1 Wavering Eyes from your deck to your hand. So, I mean, if you're playing Pendulum, you're probably looking at getting the 500 damage and pendulum monster from your main deck to your hand off. So, I mean, still not too bad. We have another Aletia, another King of Feral Imps, and Nauya, the Ogdoadic Remnant. You can send this card from your hand to the graveyard. Send 1 light reptile monster from your deck to the graveyard. If this card is normal or special summoned, you can add 1 Ogdoadic spell and trap from your hand to your deck. Bleh. Correction. Spell or trap from your deck to your hand. You can release each effect once per turn. I have absolutely no idea where the heck I got from your hand to the deck from. We have Zoha, the Ogdoadic Boundless. If this card is sent from the field to the graveyard or special summoned from the graveyard, you can activate this effect. Your opponent draws 1 card, and if they do, you add 1 Ogdoadic monster from your deck to your hand, except Zoha, the Ogdoadic Boundless. Then, each player sends 1 card from their hand to the graveyard. If this card is in your graveyard, you can send 1 card from your hand to the graveyard, add this card to your hand. You can only use each effect once per turn. So once again, sort of leaning into the milling your opponent slightly with his effect. And you have another Sulpha Cord Formal. Pot of Riches. Shuffle 3 pendulum monsters into the deck from your graveyard and or face up from your extra deck, then draw 2 cards. You can only activate 1 Pot of Riches per turn. You cannot special summon the turn you activate this card except by pendulum summon. So, I mean, downside is pretty bad, but no, that's not the one. Considering the Sulpha Cord spell that take 2 of your Pendulum Zone monsters, put them into the extra deck, draw cards, and then you can just immediately shuffle them back into the deck with him. Draw even more cards. We have Urz Arctic Megatanus, and at the very rate, this one's 8 stars, so. During the main phase, tribute 1 other level 7 or higher monster from your hand. Special summon this card from your hand. Also, you cannot special summon for the rest of this turn, except monsters with a level. If this card is special summoned while you control another Urz Arctic monster, you can target 1 face-up monster your opponent controls, change it to face-down defense position. You can only use each effect once per turn. Once again, pretty decent effect. We have Dino Wrestler Pankraptops. If your opponent controls more monsters than you do, you can special summon this card from your hand. You can only special summon Dino Wrestler Pancratops once per turn this way. Quick effect, you contribute 1 Dino Wrestler monster, then target 1 card your opponent controls, destroy it. You can only use this effect once per turn. We have Magister Paladin, the Ascending Draco Slayer. Requires 2 level 4 Pendulum monsters. And when this card is Xyz summoned, you can add 1 Pendulum monster from your deck to your hand during the end phase of this turn. Once per turn, you can detach 1 material from this card, special summon 1 face-up Draco Slayer Pendulum monster from your extra deck, but it cannot be used as material for an Xyz summon. And Ogdoadic Water Lily. Send 1 reptile monster from your deck to the graveyard. Then if you have 5 or more reptile monsters with different names in your graveyard, you can special summon 1 reptile monster from your graveyard. You can only activate 1 Ogdoadic Water Lily per turn. Can't quite make out what that is in the background on the card. Even looking at it, it's hard to say on here. If I flip it upside down, yeah, there you go. Yeah, so it's one of the Ogdoadic reptiles. Looking at the reflection in the water. Just really doesn't want to show up on camera with the foil effect on it. We have Evil Dragon Ananta. Cannot be normal summoned or set. Must be special summoned by the banishing of all reptile monsters you control and in your graveyard. This card's attack and defense becomes the number of monsters banished for its special summoning times 600 during your end phase. Target 1 card on the field to destroy that target. So, I mean, if you're filling up your graveyard anyways with reptiles, not a bad effect. Another Viper's Rebirth. Phenomenon. There's Arctic Magnatus. Dinostar Power, the Mighty Dragon Slayer. Requires 1 Draco Slayer, Pendulum monster, and 1 Pendulum monster. Must first be fusion summoned from special summoned from your extra deck by attributing the above cards you control. Pendulum monster cards in your monster zones and pendulum zones cannot be destroyed by battle or your opponent's card effect. Once per turn, you can special summon 1 Draco Slayer Pendulum monster from your hand or graveyard, but it cannot be used as fusion material. Another Late Serpent. And Nunu, the Ogdoadic Remnant. Oh, so this is the one that was actually reflected in the artwork of the water lily. In fact, you can even see the water lily at the bottom. You can send this card from your hand to the graveyard. Send 1 Dark Reptile monster from your deck to the graveyard. If you control no monsters or you control an Ogdoadic monster, you can special summon this card from your graveyard, but banish it when it leaves the field. Also, you cannot special summon monsters except reptile monsters while this card is face up in the monster zone. You can only use this effect once per turn. Or you only use each effect once per turn. So, I mean, good for filling up your graveyard. I mean, easy enough to get out to use for link summons or what have you. Summons. So we have Rise of the Snake Deity. When it faces up Phenomenon, King of the Poisonous Snakes you control is destroyed except by battle. Special summon 1 Venomi Naga, for Deity of Poisonous Snakes from your hand or deck. So, plus side, you don't need to have Venomi Naga in your hand in order to use it. You can use it. You can have her from the deck. Downside, you need to have this on the field as well as Phenomenon when he dies outside of battle. We have Ignite Reload. Reveal any number of pendulum monsters from your hand and shuffle them into the deck. Then draw cards equal to the number of cards you shuffled into the deck plus 1. For the rest of this turn after this card resolves, you cannot draw cards by card effects. You can only activate 1 Ignite Reload per turn. We have another Ignister Prominence. Another Deity of Poisonous Snakes. Ogdoadic Hollow. During the main phase, you contribute 1 reptile effect monster, then target 1 monster in your opponent's graveyard. Special summon it to your field, but send it to the graveyard during the end phase. You can only use this effect once per turn. If this face-up card is sent from the spell and trap zone to the graveyard, Send all face-up non-reptile monsters you control to the graveyard. Trade in. And Urza Arctic, Mictanus. He's only level 7. With really low stats. Wow. During the main phase, tribute one other level 7 or higher monster from your hand, special summon this card from your hand, and you cannot special summon for the rest of this turn except monsters with the level. If this card is special summoned, you can target one Urza Arctic monster in your graveyard, except Urza Arctic Minatus, add it to your hand. You can only use each effect once per turn. So, I mean, he's not a bad monster, just such sad stats. Though I think he's intended more as fodder for the other Urza Arctics. We have Ignite Reload, Offering to the Snake Deity, Sulfur Musica, Ogdoadic Boundless, Quint Charge, Skullmeister, and Alert the Ogdoadic Dark. If this card is in your graveyard, you can tribute one monster, special summon this card, then your opponent can add one monster from their graveyard to their hand. If this card is special summoned, you can target 2 of your banished monsters, including a reptile monster, return them to the graveyard. You can only use each effect once per turn. I have another Ayers Rock Sunrise, Evil Dragon Anata, Dreamia, Sulfur Scale. You can apply any of the following effects in sequence based on the number of Sulfur Pendulum card monsters you control with different names. 3+, return 1 card from your Pendulum Zone to the hand, and if you do, place one face-up Sulfur Pendulum monster from your extra deck to the Pendulum Zone. 5+, special summon 1 Sulfur Pendulum monster from your hand. And 7+, destroy all face-up cards your opponent controls. So I'm not sure how hard it would be to get out the 7, but I mean, you'll probably be looking at 3 to 5 fairly reliably. So another Damage Equal Reptile, Wavering Eyes, and Urza Arctic Slider. Target one of your Urza Arctic monsters that is banished or in your graveyard, special summon it, but it cannot attack. Also destroy it during the end phase. For the rest of this turn after this card resolves, you cannot special summon except monsters with a level. You can only activate one Urza Arctic Slider per turn. So, I mean, you still get the, because they all have their when this card is special summoned effect out of it. And I mean, it gives you another body on the field, so it's not too bad. Another Dino Wrestler, Rise of the Snake Deity, Dreamia, Flogos, Pot of Riches, Ayers Rock Sunrise, and Urza Arctic Big Dipper. Once per turn, if your Urza Arctic monster would tribute a monster to activate its effect, you can banish one level 7 or higher Urza Arctic monster from your graveyard instead. Each time a monster is special summoned, place 1 counter on this card. Once per turn, if a monster is special summoned and an Urza Arctic Synchro monster is on the field, except during the damage step, you can remove all counters from this card, minimum 7, then target 1 monster your opponent controls. Take control of it. Ooh. I mean, it takes a while to, because it requires 7 counters, but that's still not too bad. Definitely a good field spell. I have another Sulfur Scale, Evil Dragon Anata, Magister Paladin, Ignister Prominence, Trade-In, Ogdoadic Hollow, and La Sulfur Angelia. Oh, sorry about that. Your opponent cannot activate a spell or trap or monster effect while your Sulfur Pendulum monster is pendulum summoned. And while you have an odd pendulum scale in your pendulum zone, if your Sulfur Pendulum monster attacks, your opponent cannot activate spell or traps or effects until the end of the damage step. During your main phase, you contribute 1 Sulfur Pendulum monster even if face down, and if you do, special summon 1 Sulfur Pendulum monster from your deck. whose pendulum scale is 2 higher or 2 lower than the monster except last Sulfur Angelia. You can only use this effect once per turn. I mean, seems to be quite a powerful card, so be curious to see. Definitely be curious to see how big of an impact the Soulful Cord stuff has. We have another Dino Wrestler, Rise of Snake Deity, Dreamia, Flogos, Pot of Riches, Ayers Rock Sunrise, and Arctic McBillis. During the main phase, quick effect, you contribute 1 level of 7 or higher monster from your hand, special summon this card from your hand. Also, you cannot special summon for the rest of this turn, except monsters with a level. If this card is special summoned, you can special summon 1 Arctic monster from your hand, except McBillis. You can only use each effect once per turn. So, terrible stats, but very nice effect on him. I mean, the fact that he brings any other Arctic in with him is quite nice. We have Mega Tennis, Reload, Venominion, Ogdoadic Hollow, Viper's Rebirth, Soulful Cord Musica, and Arctic McPolar. During the main phase, you contribute 1 other level 7 or higher monster from your hand, special summon this card from your hand. You cannot special summon for the rest of this turn, except monsters with a level. If this card is special summoned, you can add 1 Arctic monster from your deck to your hand, except Arctic McPolar. You can only use each effect once per turn. So once again, I mean, not bad. He's replacing himself when he comes into play, so at least you can keep the chain summoning going. Chain summoning? No. Basically just, you can drop a whole bunch of them in one turn. You have Soulful Cord Scale, Evil Dragon Anata, Magister Paladin, Ignister Prominence, Trade-In, Ogdoadic Hollow, and Alert the Ogdoadic Dark. If this card is in your graveyard, you contribute 1 monster, special summon this card, then your opponent can add 1 monster from their graveyard to the hand. Special summon, you can target 2 of your banished monsters, including Reptile Monster, return them to the graveyard. We have another Skullmeister, Rise of the Snake Deity, Light Serpent, Dino Wrestler, Flogos, Dinoster Power, and Arctic Polari. Oh, look at him. He's so cute. Cannot be synchro summoned, must be special summoned from your extra deck by sending 2 monsters you control with a level difference of 1 to the graveyard. 1 tuner and 1 non-tuner. If this card is special summoned, you can activate 1 Urzatic Big Dipper directly from your deck. You contribute 1 level 7 or higher monster, add it to your hand, or special summon 1 Urzatic monster from your graveyard. You can only use each effect once per turn. I'm just curious. I didn't notice if the other... No. Oh, yeah, they are tuners. Okay. So, I mean, level 1, poor stats, but, I mean, depending on what the Big Dipper is. We have another Dinoster Power, Luster Pendulum, Arctic Megapolar, Arctic Megabilis. You know, I know it's, we're probably never going to see them, but as somebody who actually builds Gunpla models, I wouldn't actually mind getting a model of some of the Arctic model monsters. They actually look very nice. Viper's Rebirth, Ogdoadic Origin, Nunu the Ogdoadic Remnant, Ogdoadic Hollow, Trade-In, Ayers Rock Sunrise, Evil Dragon Anata, Dreamia, Soulful Chord Scale, and Soulful Chord Elegance. We have Ignister Prominence, Soulful Chord Formal, Ogdoadic Calling, Wavering Eyes, Mi Soulful Chord Elitia, King of Feral Imps, and Soulful Chord Gracia. Your opponent cannot activate a spell or trap or monster effects when your Soulful Chord Pendulum monster is pendulum summoned. While you have an even pendulum scale in your pendulum zone, if your Soulful Chord Pendulum monster attacks, your opponent cannot activate monster effects until the end of the damage step. If this card is normal or special summoned, you can add one Soulful Chord spell or trap from your deck to your hand. You can only use this effect once per turn. I have Damage Equal Reptile, Wavering Eyes, Urzartic Megapolar, Offering to the Snake Deity, Ignister Prominence, Urzartic Megabliss, and Aron the Ogdoadic King. If this card is in your graveyard, you contribute 2 monsters, special summon this card. If your opponent adds a card to their hand except during the draw phase or damage step, you can send 1 random card from their hand to the graveyard. If a monster your opponent controls is sent to the graveyard except during the damage step, you can add 1 light or dark reptile monster from your deck or graveyard to your hand except Aron the Ogdoadic King. You can only use each effect once per turn. If your opponent adds a card to their hand except during the draw phase or damage step, you can send 1 random card from their hand to the graveyard. I wonder if that works alongside the other Ogdoadic where sorry for the pause, I'm just trying to think if his would be triggering during the damage step or not. Where I think it was when when he's destroyed, you contribute. You can bring him back, and your opponent takes a card from the graveyard and adds it to their hand. I would have to check to see if that's during the damage step or if that happens after the damage step. Evil Dragon Ananta, Viper's Rebirth, Phenomenon, Urzartic Magnatus, Dinoster Power, Light Serpent, and Urzartic Slider. We have King of Feral Imps, Dinoster Power, Snake Rain, Ogdoadic Calling, Luster Pendulum, Ogdoadic Origin, and Urzartic Departure. Discard 1 card, add 2 Urzartic monsters from your deck to your hand. If you attribute a monster to activate an Urzartic monster's effect, except the turn this card was sent to the graveyard, you can banish this card from your graveyard instead. You can only use each effect once per turn. And second last pack. Ignite Reload, Offering to the Snake Deity, Soulful Chord Musica, Zoha the Ogdoadic Boundless, Quint Charge, Skullmeister, and Ogdoadic Water Lily. And final pack. We have Magister Paladin, Mi Soulful Chord Elitia, Urzartic Quint Charge, Zoha, Pot of Riches, Soulful Chord Formal, and Urzartic Minctanis. So, that's it for this week's video. If you liked it, please, like, comment, subscribe, you know the routine, and I will see you all later.